Greetings from 2023. In my hands is a card that is exactly 30 times cheaper than this card, and despite its light weight, it can run absolutely all games. I bought this RX 580 on AliExpress for $50. This 5-year-old buddy has 8GB of VRAM and a 256-bit bus, and the sticker here says that this is a Strix version. I think you already know that such an RX 580 is full of surprises. Otherwise this video wouldn't have come out. Today I will show you that even such a miracle of Chinese engineering can run absolutely all games in 2023, and then we will disassemble it and you will find out why we wanted to blast it with firecrackers. This is MK. Let's go. The card came in a box in compliance with Apple standards of all things. Inside you will find only the card itself and that's it. No brochures, no adapters, no plugs on the connectors, nothing. The box, which apparently was delivered by Ace Ventura, is not exactly generous in terms of information it provides. It only says graphics card and the manufacturer's name. Apparently, this is just a common box for all Chinese cards assembled in basements, and if you order a mobile Frankenstein RTX 3060, you're probably gonna get something similar. At first glance, there is nothing unusual about this card. A Power Color or ASRock card would look quite the same, but if you look closely, you'll see some curious details. For example, even without taking it apart, you can see that this card is used. You can see the wear of the PCIe connector contact pads. There are strange white residues on the card as if it were washed or something, and the cooling system looks like it doesn't belong here. You can clearly see that the gaps are all different and irregular. But on the other hand, no one promised us a new card, and for a used one, it looks okay. Let's first test it. After all, few people will disassemble their card immediately after it arrived. And the first thing we will find out after installing the drivers is what this card actually is. GPU-Z calls this adapter RX 580 2048 XP, whereas the real RX 580 has 15% more compute units. 2048 compute units is what RX 570 has. By the way, in the very beginning of its life, this card was not even RX 570, but more on that later. First of all, as with any used graphics card, which is most likely a crypto mining vet, it is worth finding out how much it heats up. We will be doing it not in FurMark, which synthetically loads mainly the GPU, but in the superposition benchmark. In our case, surprisingly, everything is not so bad. A half-hour gaming load on the average preset in Full HD heated up the chip to 75 degrees Celsius. That is at 100% load and with no dips in clock speed, and the power consumption was about 110 to 120 watts. The fans were working at 3000 RPM. In short, no anomalies detected. Now let's install all the games. Even back in 2018, this card was considered average at best. Now this is the base level at the very bottom of our graphics card table. Look for it in the description. It has no problems in popular games though. Dota 2 is running well. At ultra settings in Full HD, the FPS almost never dropped below 100. The card maintained high clock speed and heated up to 75 degrees Celsius. The above is also true for World of Tanks. Ultra settings, Full HD, the frame rate is always above 60. The built-in benchmark in Core yielded almost 15,000 points at Ultra. In general, for the tankman, this card for $50 is just a godsend. Both games stutter a little at times, but for the price, it's actually not that bad. No anomalies in clock speed and load were found. Let's try something more demanding, Doom Eternal. You can destroy hellish monsters on the ruins of the earth even at ultra settings if you wish. 8 gigs of RAM will allow you to do so. 70 to 80 or even 90 FPS will make the gameplay as comfortable as it can be for this price. At the same time, the card heats up to 78 degrees but maintains the fan speed only at about 2/3 of the maximum, which is quite strange. In any case, this is far from being overheated, it's just that it's weird how the fans work here. Okay, let's do this. Cyberpunk. The game, which was famous for its poor optimization and bugs, over the year has become better in this regard. Of course, ultra settings are out of question. At a low preset in 1080p, we get not the most beautiful picture, but at an average of 60 FPS. The card is heated to 70 degrees, but the fans are behaving strangely again. If you want higher settings, you can try medium preset and turn on the FSR to balance. In this case, you can get 30 FPS with a decent picture. Quite a console-like experience. Setting FSR to performance allows you to get your 60 FPS back, but in this case, the picture is too blurry. An AMD-supported game Far Cry 6 works perfectly well. At high graphics settings, without turning on FSR, you can get an average of 55 frames per second. Given that this is a single-player game, such a result is excellent, and the picture is quite pleasant. By the way, this is another game that takes more than 4 GB of VRAM. This is a note for those of you who's looking to buy a 4GB RX or a 3GB 1060 or something. As for heating and clock speeds, again, there is nothing special here either. Walking around the post-apocalyptic Russia of the future in Metro Exodus is also possible, no problem. At average graphics settings in Full HD, the benchmark produces about 55 FPS. At the same time, the built-in benchmark always shows the worst-case scenario. In the actual game, the frame rate will almost always be over 60, so if desired, you can play around with the graphics settings a bit more. The next in line is a cinematic journey through the Wild West, a game that got into students' books and never ceases to amaze with graphics. In Red Dead Redemption 2, alas, you have to pay for beautiful graphics. Therefore, you can play more or less comfortably only at medium-low settings in 1080p, with an average frame rate of about 40. This is a console game, so this kind of performance is quite enough for it, especially considering that the graphics, even on such a preset, looks quite good. You can even play the new Call of Duty Warzone 2 on this card, at medium settings, Full HD and with FSR enabled. The frame rate will not exactly be even, but on average more than 60. This is what I would call playable. And finally, The Witcher 3 Remaster, which simply humiliates graphics cards today just like the original used to back in the days when it was first released. Our pseudo RX 580 looks quite okay here too. 1080p, automatic FSR 2, high graphics settings, and the frame rate around 45 to 50. It's generally playable, but still far from good. Everything is okay with heating. The card barely reaches 70 degrees and the fans, as usual, live their own life. They spin only at 80%. I think that this is all there is to see here. Despite the fact that this card was not a top-notch even at the time of its release, in 2023 it handles games pretty well. At high graphic settings in Full HD. While in some heavy projects it is necessary to go down to medium or low, but I still think that for a $50 card, which has been in operation for 7 years, this is quite a decent result. Did I say 7? I was not mistaken actually. Let's take this card apart and see how much the Chinese comrades have tinkered with it. The first thing that catches your eye after removing the fans is the unusual look of the heatsink. It is fully covered with silver paint, even copper heat pipes. As the test showed, this did not affect the cooling performance in any way. The question remains why this was done. Perhaps the card was operated in a humid climate and the copper turned green, and to hide this, the entire radiator was painted. At the same time, the places that should be in contact with memory chips have been cleaned of paint, but not all of them. Taking into account the fact that the thermal pads and the thermal paste are fresh, and there is almost no dust on the back of the fan blades, we can conclude that the card was actually serviced before shipping. Now let's look at the PCB. Here's where things start to look ugly. The video chip looks toasted. The compound, which is a special substance around the die, is already dark brown in color, when normally it should be closer to gray. Given that usually a memory controller is located on the edge of the die, which when cryptomining heats up a lot, the story of this card is becoming more transparent. But the most interesting thing is the marking of the video chip. It reveals that this is an RX 470. But how did it become RX 580 2048 SP? Quite simply, all that needs to be done is change the BIOS. Fortunately, AMD cards allow you to do that with no problems whatsoever, given the fact that these cards have the same number of compute units and the clock speeds differ just by 100 MHz. Doing that is a piece of cake. The memory chips are good though. These are Samsung GDDR5, which were used in both the 400 and 500 series. All the chips are the same, none seem to have been replaced. But it is already noticeable that those of them that were squeezed between the hot video chip and the power zone have turned yellow in the center. Well, in the end, the most disgusting thing about this card is its backplate. A huge amount of shiny yellow sticky substance. This is flux that's used for soldering. It means that the card was repaired? Actually no, there are no signs of repair on it. But then how did it end up on the backplate and even the capacitors on the side closest to the memory chips and GPU? The answer is simple. This board is not the first one for this chip, and maybe not even the second, who knows. Most likely due to the MOSFET's burnout, the original board failed, and the video chip that survived was transplanted to a new board. This theory is confirmed by the shiny LED solder under it, whereas the factory LED free solder is matte. It is also possible that they added some extra memory, from 4 to 8 GB in order to continue mining. This is hinted at by the fact that the memory is significantly less toasted than the GPU. Apparently, during the transplant, no one removed the backplate and did not care about the temperatures. This is why the flux flowed down and the power connector of the fans is of a delicate yellow color, while a couple of polymer capacitors are swollen. So what are we getting at here? If you don't disassemble it, it's pretty good. Otherwise, it has a worn-out video chip from 2016 which is 1 foot in the grave. transplanted to another PCB in some Chinese basement, slightly toasted memory chips, a spray-painted radiator, perhaps to hide traces of corrosion, a custom BIOS that turned the RX 470 into 580 with GPU overclocking, and a smelly sticky backplate. Yuck. At the same time, the card looks good, lest you look inside. I can't recommend this zombie to you for purchase. At first we thought we should blow it up at the end of the video, but I decided that this could be regarded as an insult to the feelings of those who build PCs with all Xeon processors. If you are a fan of tickling your nerves, then please follow the link in the description. There will be a link to this particular model, and now I think it costs about $70 or so. For this money, I don't understand why you would want to buy it and whether it makes sense. But hey, it's your money, right? Also, in the description you will find a graphics card rating summary table, a very clear one. My name is Mikhail Krashin. I'll see you again. Bye.